Did you know that BDSM and kink are healthy outlets for aggression, imagination, and attention? Hi, and welcome to The Partition, home of Kinky Wellness. My name is Dana Slosser, and I'm a sexual wellness coach that dives deep into all things kinky. I'm here to show how BDSM and kink deserves a rightful spot within the sexual wellness conversation. So, let's talk about it. So, today we're going to do a little bit of a learning podcast today, and I will be talking about the 5 psychosexual stages of development that Sigmund Freud developed. Why? Because so much of what we do as adults stems from our development and how we were raised. So I feel that it's important for us to know these things so we can have a better understanding and start to unpack some things about who we are and maybe who we aren't. So let's get right into it. Sigmund Freud was born in 1856 and was an Austrian neurologist and the founder of psychoanalysis. Freud's theory suggested that human behavior is influenced by the unconscious memories, thoughts, and urges that we have. He is famous for this theory that the psyche is compromised by the 3 elements, the id, ego, and superego. So the id is entirely unconscious, while the ego operates in the conscious mind. Freud died in 1939, but people continue to discuss his work on this even today. So Freud believed that our early childhood experiences were fundamental for shaping our personalities, and he thought that as we progressed through childhood, we faced a number of difficulties for conflicts, and those conflicts needed to be successfully resolved for us in order to develop properly. So if we didn't properly resolve these conflicts, he believed that they would later manifest as anxiety or mental illness. So the goal of psychoanalysis was to look back into the person's past, so into their childhood, and then try to uncover the contents of the subconscious figure. So basically the goal is to go back into our childhood and figure out what fucked us up and then, try to fix it. To reduce the current problem that we're in. So today I'll be focusing on Freud's 5 psychosexual stages of development. So those 5 stages are the oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital stages. And each have an age range that are associated to it. So all the videos and research that I did for this podcast will be in the description. So each stage has a focus of the pleasure that it brings, a conflict, and a fixation if there is conflict. So the fixation can stay with a person into adulthood until it actually gets resolved. So let's get into the first stage. So the first stage is the oral stage and happens in the first year of our life. During this time, the libido is centered in our mouth. So during that year, babies actually receive all of their satisfaction or much of their satisfaction from putting things in their mouths, right? Like they're sucking on things. It's also how they communicate. That's how they're learning. So, and this is just how babies are fed, obviously. So babies during this time are learning to trust that someone's going to feed them and that they're going to be fed when they need it and how much they need it. So not under or over. So that's what's going on in that little baby's head. That's what he said. So Freud said that if there was a disruption during this time, such as if the baby was weaned off of the bottle or the breast too early, it could develop into an oral fixation, such as nail biting or thumb sucking or even smoking. And that when those children grow up into adults, and they were under stress, that fixation would become worse. So the nail biting would be worse, the thumb sucking would be worse, the smoking would be worse. And it makes sense that the mouth would be your primary place for pleasure because as an infant, that's really the only way that we're interacting with the world. So if a baby is weaned off too quickly, it means that the infant won't get the security that they need. So the second stage happens between years 1 and 3. Freud believed that the children of this age derived pleasure from defecating. This is because during this time, children are learning how to potty train. So they are learning that they can't just go to the bathroom whenever they want anymore. And parents are now upping their role in dictating to this child when and where this will happen. So during this transition, if a child is raised in a home with harsh toilet training, or, if they're being yelled at for making mistakes, it could lead to a fixation. So the fixation could be obsessively tidy, punctual, and very, very respectful of authority. Freud also said that if you potty train too early for a child, that this could also result in this type of behavior. So not just yelling at the child, but starting it too early. And honestly, when I was reading and learning about this, I didn't realize how sensitive toilet training is. So this is food for thought for anyone who wants or have little kids. Patience is definitely needed here. And the third stage of the psychosexual development is the phallic stage. So the phallic stage happens between the ages of 3 and 6 and is characterized by a change in a sexual impulse from the anus to the genitals. So this stage also has a lot of controversy around it. When I was going into it, there was a lot going on about his controversial views of the Oedipus and Electra complexes development. So I'll just speak on it briefly. I'll jump into the phallic stage in a minute, but basically the Oedipus complex is a Freudian term that was named after a man that knowingly killed his father and slept with his mother, right? So Freud said that a boy develops an unconscious infatuation towards his mother during this time, while simultaneously fearing his father because he's a rival. And this happens at an unconscious level. So the child unconsciously is going through this. And so the Electra complex is the term used to describe the female version of that. So it involves a girl becoming subconsciously sexual towards her father and increasingly hostile towards her mother. I found that this work also was done by Carl Jung in 1913. So I'm definitely going to loop back to this in a later podcast just because there's so much hate on it as much as there was good things for it. So I really want to do my research on that. So I'm just going to stick to the broad overview of the 5 stages of the psychosexual development. So according to Freud, this phallic stage happens when both boys and girls become fixated on the penis. For girls, they fixate on the lack of their penis and its absence. They give more attention to their clitoris. The negative outcomes of an unresolved phallic fixation could lead both men and women into self-centeredness and a low sense of self-worth or shyness. So, yeah, basically little boys want their moms and little girls want their dads, and, they don't like the other. So that's that stage. But the 4th stage happens between 6 and 12, and this is the latency stage. So children now are developing social skills through community and interactions with other people that are outside of their immediate family. However, Freud's other famous work on the id, ego, and superego, this is where it comes into play during this stage, because this is where Freud believed that the sexual energy gets redirected towards different outlets like hobbies, making new friends, learning new things. So because their social circle is expanding, they have other outlets to do these things. So he believed that this is when children develop the strongest relationships with others of the same sex, because they're focusing all their energy on those friendships. So the fixation on this one, so if there's a disruption that happens during this development, the fixation for latency could result in immaturity and an inability to develop close personal relationships with others, especially as an adult. So getting kids to interact between 6 and 12, that's very, very important, just to make sure that they're developing interpersonal relationships as they get older. And the 5th and final stage is the genitalia stage. So this happens after the age of 12. This is a major development during this stage because it's when we are reaching or starting to, in Freud's terms, full sexual maturity. This is a time of adolescent sexual experimentation. So Freud said that if you did this successfully, it would be easier for a person to settle down in one-on-one relationships with another person. And if you didn't do sexual or adolescent sexual experimentation during this age, he said it would cause a conflict, and the negative fixation would be sexual perversions would develop in adult life. Now, Freud has a lot of critics. I know I said that, but so one scientific researcher that I saw, they claim that it's too difficult to test these methods scientifically. One researcher claimed that it's too difficult to test his methods scientifically because some research found that the theory that he is suggesting could not be fully plausible. So I don't know. A lot of the work that Freud did relied on a lot of patients recounting their experiences to him and things that had happened in their childhood. So it was all hearsay, and you couldn't really put a number on his work. And I did see that a lot of feminist theories were not a big fan of him at all. Like, that's where a lot of hate was coming from. That's why I want to dive into the earlier stages at a later podcast. Freud had a lot of work on male development, on the penis envy theory. And so that definitely has people more upset now versus when it came, like, in the 90s, this was not crazy. Now it's, very crazy. So regardless if you like Freud or you don't like him, Freud's work is very, very influential today. So I think that people need to be reminded of these stages of development and how important they are and why they lay the foundation of our sexual experiences as we get older. And he really understood that trauma and the way that we repress it has a significant impact on us into adulthood. While his timeline of stages and each stage are important, and, they're still disputed right now. Like, it's still agreed that the early childhood experiences that we have are a crucial role in lifelong personal and social development. So overall, I do agree with Freud that a lot of what we go through it comes from our childhood. It's just connected to us. And our sexual self is still connected to ourselves. At some point, it starts to develop. It's not like we hit 18 and then boom, we have a sexual self. Like, this is something that comes with us as we're born. Sex and sexuality, and it comes with the nature of us being. And I think going back into the past and understanding what happened to us is healthy for us, and it can allow us to move past things. So I know looking into your past can be hard. There was a time where I didn't want to look back into my past because, it was too painful. But just because it was too painful, pain will be there whether I was going to look at it or not. I had to look at it to get rid of it, and I had to make that choice to work through it because looking into my past explained a lot about who the person I was and how I was behaving. And, there was definitely behaviors that I was doing that I didn't want to do anymore, so I wanted to fix it. But you have to learn about those things. So think about what you just heard today out of the 5 stages. Does anything stick out to you? Do you like what you heard? Should I do another podcast like this? I don't know. Let me know in the comments. This is a lot to digest today, so I'm just going to leave this here. So the 5 psychosexual stages of development that Sigmund Freud developed are oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital stages. But I will be diving deeper into topics like this in further episodes. And if you're expert or, you want to challenge the subject or talk about the subject more in depth, I would love to hear from you and ask you some questions and get your perspective. But that's it for me. And of course, if you're new here or to the BDSM scene, check out my BDSM Basics e-learning for the 3 basics everyone needs to know before getting into BDSM and kink at www.thepartition.life. Again, that's www.thepartition.life. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time. I hope you learned something today. And as always, stay kinky.